Thanks for the introduction, Bruce. As you mentioned, my name is Jeff Peters, and I'm the Southeast Regional Director here at WoodWorks. Today, I'll be discussing how to make the case for mass timber while keeping some of your costs in check. Many of you are in a role where you might be trying to influence the owner or the developer's decision to consider mass timber. I'll provide you with a lot of tips for making this case, many of which have been major drivers for mass timber projects completed to date. So we'll also talk a little bit about the WoodWorks design and cost optimization checklists for mass timber as well. This is a publication full of a ton of great information for you to reference on our website as well. WoodWorks recently published the mass timber cost and design optimization checklists. The checklists are meant to guide discussions between designers, builders, owners, as they're working their way and making decisions during these design and estimating processes of a mass timber building. This document is broken down into multiple different phases, including a pre-design or a conceptual phase, which we highly encourage designers and builders to review along with the owner as well. There are also checklists for the schematic design phase, as well as the design and development phase. This document includes links to a lot of reference documents on various topics as well. We've had some wonderful feedback on this to date, and there are several general contractors that have told us that they wish they'd had this document when they took on their first mass timber project. So I highly recommend you download this and distribute this to the entire team, to include, the owner, all the designers, and the builder as well. So the pre-design checklist, this portion covers topics such as the design and the builder team. One of the most important things to point out here is that, the mass timber is prefabricated, and to achieve the benefits of a prefabricated system, the builders need to be brought in during these early design phases. The, contractual consideration should also be discussed early as well. Your typical design, bid, build, that delivery method is definitely not recommended for a prefabricated mass timber building, since it does not involve the builder until later, right? So choosing a delivery method and setting up the contracts to bring in the builder and other specialists early in is key to optimizing the cost of this mass timber building. And so WoodWorks provides complimentary project support. And the sooner we can discuss this project with you, the more value we can add and help you towards a successful project. So in the pre-design section of the checklist, there is a potential benefits chart. This chart summarizes the value that prefabricated mass timber can add to a project. So this is the table that you'll see and you'll use to build your case for mass timber. And so I'll go through these items, very briefly, as the following slides will touch on each one of those benefits specifically and have some project examples as well. So these benefits should be discussed early on with the owner, the builder, and the architect, and decide if each one of these particular ones is for your project is a project goal, or if it's a value add to the overall project. So let's take a look at the Seattle Mass Timber Tower. This is a case study report for developers interested in mass timber, and it provides a direct design and construction cost comparison between a mass timber structure and a baseline post-tension cast-in-place concrete structural system for a 12-story hypothetical mixed-use building in downtown Seattle. So accurate construction cost comparisons between, say, different structural systems are difficult to obtain, as complete designs are required for both systems. So that's often timely and cost prohibitive. So prepared by industry experts, we have this case study that will work both for when comparing the cost with, say, a mass timber and the PT concrete systems. One of the major benefits that we see with mass timber are schedule savings. So in this particular case study, a mass timber structure can be built 5 months or basically 25% faster than the baseline PT structure. So the faster construction schedule combined with leasing velocity can potentially yield a very nice return for a developer. And so the program also includes retail on the first level, 5 floors of a Class A office building targeting technical tenants, and 192 key hotel room. Most of you may not be very familiar with what kind of leasing velocity is, and so it really refers to the overall interest that is experienced from potential tenants and the number of leases that the developer secures on behalf of that particular project. So organizations and companies seeking newly constructed office space will be drawn to more of the positive environmental attributes, the warm aesthetics, and the unique characteristics and sense of innovation that a mass timber building can offer. This is a diagram that shows you where to look for ways to compress the typical construction schedule with a mass timber building in comparison to a concrete or steel construction. The first bar is for below grade foundations and soils. So if you're on a site with very problematic soils, a lightweight mass timber system can offer significant savings, both as it relates to your schedule and your cost as well. So we've seen many projects that have converted to lightweight wood system due to substantial savings with less soil remediation and smaller foundations. So on sites with problematic soils, you can also potentially have an earlier start time for your mass timber superstructure if less time is spent on below grade work and soil remediation. The second bar on the top is for the mass timber structure. So mass timber is, a completely prefabricated and very precise system which allows it to be installed quickly. On the third bar, the building envelope and exterior. Now you can see there is an opportunity for an early start here as well. So there's no curing time with mass timber construction, so follow-up trades can start work, below shortly after the panels are put in place. And so at the end of this bar, you'll see a note indicating that if the building envelope is prefabricated, there can be savings in the enclosure time as well. So in order to protect the timber, it's also desirable to enclose the building as fast as possible. So prefabricated envelopes work very well with mass timber buildings as well. For the MEP bar, our fourth bar, again, since there's no time to wait for concrete to cure, follow-up MEP trades can begin work shortly after panels are placed. So it's also recommended to fully coordinate the MEP in the design phase so that it can be installed faster in the field for additional savings. And then the second to last bar is for interior finishes. So either interior finishes can start earlier since there's no waiting for cure times, or the structure is the finish. So you even have that potential of eliminating additional trades on site as well, which will result in a much faster construction schedule. So, overall, in summary, there can be up to about a 25% schedule savings to include less carrying costs, less GC overhead, and the ability to lease and occupy the building much sooner. This is a table from our cost optimization checklist that shows kind of some example timeframes for erection of mass timber projects. The checklist also has some good quotes from contractors on time savings in comparison to other materials as well. So strongly suggest you check that out. I would encourage you to download the Candlewood Suites case study on the woodworks.org website. So in this case study, you'll find the mass timber statistics for Lend-Lease's military hotels that compare a mass timber system to a cold form stud system. This was an excellent project in that the project was completed about 37% faster with 40% fewer workers on site, and they were able to train veterans who had no prior mass timber experience to install that structure. One of the early mass timber projects is the T3 building in Minneapolis by Hines. They're one of the leading office building developers in the country. This is a 6-story, 200,000 square foot building that was constructed for somewhere between about $25 to $50 million back in 2016. And it sold in 2018 for $87 million. Just to let you know, this is the very first mass timber project to be acquired in the United States. Most of you are probably wondering kind of how we work with routing MEP in a building like this. So if you take a look at this picture, you can see that they were able to route all the MEP mains around the concrete core. And this was achieved by a reduction in the span from that core wall to the interior column, which allowed for a shallower beam and provides that additional volume for the design team to keep that MEP pushed up towards the ceiling and out of the way. So this allows them to run ducts and other MEP longitudinally out into the bays right off those main trunk lines. This was, like I said, a 220,000 square foot structure. It took only about 2.5 months to build. And the engineers on this project reported a savings in the foundations as well. So considering that the mass timber structure is about 30% lighter than steel and about 60% lighter than a concrete structure, you can see how this resulted in smaller foundations and thus additional cost savings. There are potential client build out savings as well, since the structure is typically exposed. As you can see here in the T3 building, we've highlighted the warmth and the beauty of the exposed structure. So remember, the structure is typically the finish. So there may not be a significant amount of cost associated with a client build out because they want that warm and beautiful structure exposed. Taking this past kind of that project completion point and looking at the benefits of a healthy building and employee retention, the thought here is that if you have a healthy building, employees are more likely to stay. So losing an employee can be very expensive when considering the costs associated with, say, termination, replacement, and mostly the lost productivity in an organization. So providing an environment where employees have opportunities for a reduction in stress, one that stimulates their creativity and the ability to learn, can be a very positive factor in retaining long-term employees. And these mass timber buildings with this beautiful exposed structure is typically what draws them to these types of environments, and thus hopefully resulting in long-term employees. We usually like to focus on projects here in the US, but I wanted to share this Australian project with you because it provides a really good example on adding vertical density over an existing building with innovative lightweight mass timber. So this is 55 South Bank. It's an existing building that was built to accommodate a future 6-story addition of concrete construction. The owner wanted to add a 220 key hotel room on top of this existing building. And so the designers were faced with a challenge because adding that vertical addition of 6 stories of concrete would not accommodate this existing design with that many hotel rooms. And so since mass timber is roughly 2/3 lighter than concrete, the designers were able to add 10 stories of mass timber instead of the 6 stories of concrete. So the cool thing about this project is that the vertical addition was done with zero impact to the existing foundations and the building structure below. So this is a really great example of how to showcase the lightweight value of wood structures. So in this particular case, 6 stories of concrete was no good. It was a no deal, but 10 stories of mass timber is what really made this project move forward. So, research has shown that about 1/4 of the urban buildings in the world are strong enough to carry additional floors of wood. Wood significantly contributes to the US economy as well by supporting rural economies and increases forest value as well. So in 2018, the wood products industry supported 434,900 jobs in the US with a payroll of roughly 21 billion. And so if you want some additional information about this, the American Wood Council has some excellent publications that cover this on a state-by-state level. So you can just check out that link that we have here on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, and you can actually find data related to your specific state. So check that out. The National Alliance of Forest Landowners, or NAFO, also has an interactive US map that shows statistics on jobs and timberland acres on a state-by-state level as well. It also breaks down each state into a regional district. So there's some great regional info you can obtain on this site as well. One of the #1 drivers for a mass timber project is that they are environmentally friendly. Most people know that wood has a lower embodied carbon footprint, but it also sequesters a tremendous amount of carbon as well. So When you're looking at an image like this, stop and think for a minute. Wood is 50% carbon by dry weight. And yes, the structure is beautiful, and yes, the building is warm and attractive, but the big picture here is that this building is 50% carbon. With climate change on the rise and things we're trying to do to mitigate those effects, visualizing this building as a massive carbon sink, and that this building will store the carbon that is sequestered in this wood for the entire life of the building. Designing a mass timber building really allows us to create carbon sinks in very dense urban environments. So just something to really think about as we move forward in being more energy efficient and being more aware of our carbon footprints. In the schematic design phase, there are separate checklists for design and cost optimization. So the design optimization checklist covers important topics like material optimization, optimal grids and system coordination. So the cost of mass timber is most influenced by these systems. So it's important to balance those requirements for structure, acoustics, vibration, and even fire resistance ratings. So the checklist also includes resources that go into more detail on those particular topics. So one of our newest resources is an expert tip on mass timber material optimization and grids. So I highly recommend visiting our website to view that particular tip. In the schematic design phase, when a builder is considering cost, one of the most important topics is schedule savings. So we'll talk a little bit more about where to look for those schedule saving opportunities in just a few moments. So it's also important to consider the aesthetic value of mass timber buildings as well. So this is resulting in increased leasing velocity and leasing premiums for the building owners as well. So all great things to consider. This is the T3 West Midtown in Atlanta. The counterpart was the T3 building in Minneapolis, and this is another excellent Heinz building and one that is finally here in the Southeast. And so a big difference in the Atlanta T3 building that they did not do in the Minneapolis T3 building is that in the Atlanta building, they used a steel brace frame for their lateral system. In the T3 building in Minneapolis, they used a concrete core. And what they found is that the concrete core really slowed down the construction process. So by switching to the steel brace frame, that really allowed the team to keep up with the fast-paced schedule of the mass timber structure. So really just a great change that they made here. Please note here, this is 6 stories over a type 4 podium. I'm sorry, not a type 4 podium, 6 stories of type 4 construction over a concrete podium, about 205,000 square foot. Now this is a DLT system, a dowel laminated timber floor system, as an alternative to a cross laminated timber floor system. With a dowel laminated timber floor system, if you're not familiar with that, they basically will use dimensional lumber and they'll lay it up just like they would say like a nail laminated floor timber. They pre-drill a hole, they pressure inject or shoot a hardwood dowel that has a lower moisture content than the base material, and that hardwood dowel will wick the moisture out of the base material, expand and mechanically lock everything in place. So a really great green product that they used in this T3 Atlanta building. This is 901 East 6th in Austin, and this is a hybrid CLT and steel frame building that achieved leasing velocity and helped with leasing premiums and was the second mass timber building to be acquired in the United States. So according to an Austin Business Journal article, the local experts there speculated that this building sold for a record-breaking price. We don't have that particular data, but this is a 5-story, 129,000 square foot CLT and steel frame hybrid with 14-foot floor to ceiling heights and 9-foot tall windows. So just a really great example of very successful mass timber building. Here's some of the items in the design development checklist. There are some new topics such as key details and protection of the mass timber. Those are also introduced in this particular checklist. I do want to stress that when you start the DD phase of the project, the very first step should be to go back through all your checklist items in the schematic design phase. All of those items are still applicable, still relevant in the DD phase, and may need some refining. So take a look at those as well before you start jumping forward. And so one item to note that will really be helpful is really looking at the finished quality of your material. So at this point, it's really a good time to think about if there are areas on your project where you could specify, say, an industrial grade CLT instead of more of an architectural grade finish for your CLT. There's some very strict requirements per the PRG 320 specification for architectural grade CLT that can really increase the cost of that material. So you'll definitely want to have that discussion with your chosen manufacturer and see if there are areas where you could just specify the industrial grade CLT and really help reduce some of your overall cost on the project. Moisture management is also very important for keeping the wood dry and keeping your project on track. There are some simple strategies that can be employed to mitigate moisture and protect your investment as well. So we have 3 resources listed here to help you on this particular topic. The first is the moisture management guide, which applies to both, say your traditional light frame buildings that you're very familiar with, as well as mass timber construction. So that's a really excellent guide. It's a free download for you. The second is the NLT guide, or the nail laminated timber guide. And although this document is written, specifically for NLT, it does have some really good tips that you can link to all mass timber. So another great free download for you there as well. Now, the last one and the most recent publication is by RDH Consulting. They have released a detailed book on moisture risk management, and you're able to purchase that publication online. So we provided the link for you, so you can just copy that link down and navigate to the website and purchase that publication for your library as well. So in this diagram, this shows that, under our current codes, right, we don't have to start with these big, tall mass timber buildings. We're hearing a lot of talk in the industry about how the IBC 2021 is changing to allow us to go taller and bigger with mass timber buildings, but we don't have to start that way. You might just want to dip your foot in the water, dip your toe in the water with something that you're already familiar with, or something that our current codes already allow us to do. You can easily achieve a very sizable timber building when you compare that to, say, some of your traditional steel and concrete construction types. So let's just take a quick look at, say, an office or a business occupancy. Here on the left-hand side, you'll see that, in a type 5B building, that allows you up to about 81,000 square feet. In a type 3B building, or even a type 5A building, you can get up to 162,000 square feet and 4 stories. And so those are very sizable buildings. And so the thing to note here is that, say you were to, specify your traditional non-combustible type 2B construction, that really only gets you an additional, say, 24% in, say, building area increase. And so there's not a significant jump there. And you may even be able to increase your design with, a sprinkler increase or something, or frontage increase. So think about that as well. Say you want to go larger, up to 6 stories in height. A type 3A structure has an allowable area of 256,000 square feet. A type 4 building allows 324,000 square feet. And a type 2A building, that only gets you an additional 4% increase. So almost all of the examples you saw in today's presentation fit within these allowable heights and areas permitted under our current codes. So there's no need to explore necessarily tall wood at this point. If you want to look at doing just your very first mass timber project, there's a lot of opportunities under our existing code to design some very beautiful and large mass timber structures. So you don't have to start with this innovative mass timber building. The Ice Block 1 is Sacramento's very first modern timber office building, which has won several awards, including a Wood Design Award and an award from the Urban Land Institute in Sacramento. And this is more of a traditional heavy timber building. It used 3x timber decking, which is not a prefabricated system, and it was all installed on site. So This building did, however, have a business case that is very similar to mass timber, right? The developer wanted to achieve leasing velocity and had his pick of high credit tenants for this very distinctive office building. So 135,000 square foot of retail and restaurant space, about 40,000 square foot of below grade parking. So just a really beautiful 3-story office building, 20 by 24 foot grids. We get those questions a lot. What is the optimal grid size? So just wanted to highlight that for you as well. So millennials, right? Millennials are estimated to make up about 50% of the workforce here in 2020. They care about their office space and creating a demand for mass timber. A lot of business owners are trying to attract talent with craft coffee and exposed timber offices, and we've seen examples of this with companies like Microsoft and Google. So we'll sometimes get the question, where are these mass timber buildings going up? And one of my colleagues shared with me that anywhere you see expensive coffee is where you're going to see a mass timber building, most likely. So those just a little background there, some of the things that we've seen in the industry. We've talked a lot about office projects today, because that's where we've seen a lot of corporate companies and a lot of the early private developers have success with mass timber. Now, however, there are other sectors that can support mass timber projects as well, such as universities, industrial type projects, and even multifamily. Universities need to attract students, and mass timber can help support. It can help support a university's commitment to, say, innovation and to the environment. And so the image on the upper left is Adohi Hall. It's a student dormitory project at the University of Arkansas. The mass timber building is over 200,000 square feet. On the top right is another building from the University of Arkansas. It's their library storage facility which has this kind of industrial theme to it, and with very, very high bays. And then also several mass timber manufacturers, they've also built their own industrial shops for mass timber. In the multifamily sector, Carbon 12 is one of the few completed projects to date. However, there are several exciting projects that are currently under construction and in design. On the bottom right is the intro. It's a 298 unit apartment building that recently broke ground in Cleveland, Ohio. And so the one thing to remember too is that we don't have to do an entire mass timber structure. In the world of multifamily, there'd be opportunities to, do a mass timber, say CLT floor system in place of engineered floor trusses with even prefabricated walls, stick frame walls. The thing there is just keeping your speed optimized. So that's something to consider as well. WoodWorks is a national green print innovation partner with the Urban Land Institute. Now, they're the largest organization of real estate developers. This is a link to this particular ULI article on the expanding presence of mass timber in the commercial building industry. It's a great article to share with owners and developers. And so that pretty much wraps up this part of the presentation. Thanks for allowing me to spend a little bit of time with you this morning, and I hope you have tons of questions now that I would love to hear from you and hear some of the questions you may have about optimizing your design and ways to potentially save some cost in your design and your planning process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this back over to Bruce, and then he will kick us off for our panel Q&A. Once again, Jeff Peters, I am your Southeast Regional Director here at WoodWorks. I cover Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, South Georgia, and recently acquired the wonderful state of Louisiana. So I'd love an opportunity to chat with you. You have my contact information on the screen. If you're not able to stick around for Q&A or even the office hours this afternoon, feel free to give me a call or send me an email. I'm always available for you. I can do kind of a virtual Zoom lunch and learn for you, or we can just have other conversations about any projects that you may be working on. So Bruce, thank you for the wonderful introduction this morning. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you.